They said she was just a waitress. They said she belonged in the kitchen, not at the negotiation table. Preston Calloway, a man whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small countries, made the biggest mistake of his life the night he snapped his fingers at Nora Vance. He thought the grease on her apron meant her mind was empty. He didn't know that while he was buying yachts, she was mastering the very laws that protected his fortune. What happened next didn't just silence the room, it destroyed an empire in 10 minutes flat. Watch closely. You won't believe who she really is. The air inside L'Opulence didn't smell like food. It smelled like old money and aggressive cologne. It was the kind of Manhattan establishment where the napkins were linen. The water was imported from glaciers that no longer existed, and the waitstaff were treated less like human beings and more like automated furniture. Nora Vance adjusted the collar of her stiff white uniform. Her feet throbbed. Double shifts were grueling, but they were the only thing keeping the lights on in her cramped studio apartment in Queens. She picked up the heavy silver tray, balancing 4 crystal flutes of vintage Dom Perignon, and took a deep breath. Table 1 was occupied tonight. In the hierarchy of L'Opulence, Table 1 was the throne. And tonight, the king was Preston Calloway. Preston was a man who took up space even when he was sitting still. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Nora would earn in 5 years. His face was plastered on every business magazine in the lobby. The shark of Wall Street, the man who never loses. Currently, he was flanked by 3 nervous-looking men in grey suits, his legal team, and a younger woman, Isabella, who was scrolling disinterestedly on her phone. "The acquisition needs to happen by Friday," Preston boomed, his voice cutting through the ambient piano music. "I don't care if you have to bribe the zoning commissioner or buy the damn building he lives in. Get it done." Nora approached the table silently, practicing the art of invisibility that her manager, Henry, demanded. "Excuse me, sir," she murmured, leaning in to place a coaster. Preston didn't look up. He waved a hand dismissively, nearly knocking the tray from her grip. "Not now. Can't you see we're working? Come back when the glasses are empty." The glasses were empty. That was why she was there. Nora paused, biting the inside of her cheek. She set the fresh champagne down with surgical precision, swapping out the empties. As she reached for the final glass near Preston's elbow, he slammed his hand on the table to emphasize a point to his lead lawyer, a sweating man named Arthur, regarding the Vanderbilt clause. "Arthur, you're useless. The clause in the contract regarding the maritime zoning restrictions, it's a loophole. We exploit the riparian rights. If the waterline recedes, the land is ours. It's basic property law." The liquid in the glass Nora was holding sloshed over the rim. A single cold drop landed on the sleeve of Preston's Italian wool suit. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. Preston slowly turned his head. His eyes, cold and blue like chipped ice, locked onto the damp spot on his wrist, then travelled up to Nora's face. "You," he whispered, the word dripping with venom. "I am so sorry, sir," Nora said quickly, reaching for the cloth at her waist. "Let me just—" "Don't touch me!" Preston barked, standing up. The chair scraped violently against the marble floor. The entire restaurant, senators, heiresses, tech moguls, froze. All eyes turned to Table 1. "Do you know how much this suit costs?" Preston sneered, brushing the droplet away as if it were toxic waste. "It costs more than your entire education, assuming you even have one." Isabella giggled from her seat. "Preston, don't be mean. She probably went to— what is it called? Public school?" Nora lowered her hand. Her face burned, but her spine stiffened. She had been insulted by rich men before. It was part of the job description. But there was something about Preston's arrogance, the casual cruelty of it, that struck a nerve she thought she had buried years ago. "I apologize, Mr. Calloway," Nora said, her voice steady. "I can bring you some club soda. It will lift the stain immediately." "I don't want club soda," Preston spat. "I want competence. But I suppose that's too much to ask from someone who fetches drinks for a living. Tell me, what's the hardest part of your day? Remembering who ordered the sparkling water and who ordered the still. It must be taxing." Arthur, the lawyer, tried to intervene. "Mr. Calloway, please, let's just focus on the merger. The riparian rights issue is complex, and if we don't—" "It's not complex, Arthur," Preston shouted, turning back to his team but keeping a finger pointed at Nora. "It's simple. Even this waitress could understand it if she had a brain in her head. It's about leveraging the coastline." He turned back to Nora, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He wanted an audience. He wanted to vent his frustration with his lawyers on a target that couldn't fight back. "Hey!" He snapped his fingers in front of her face. "You. Do you know what riparian rights are? Or do you think that's a brand of bottled water?" Nora looked at him. She looked at the sweating lawyers. She looked at the documents spread across the table, blueprints of the Hudson Yards extension, and a thick contract titled "The Grand Merger of Calloway Industries and Helix Maritime." She saw the highlighted paragraph Preston was pointing at. "Actually," Nora said, her voice quiet, but carrying a strange resonance that reached the tables nearby, "I do know what they are." Preston laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Oh? You do? Please enlighten us. The floor is yours, Garçon. Teach my high-priced legal team about property law." Henry, the manager, was rushing over, his face pale. "Mr. Calloway, is there a problem? Nora, get back to the kitchen immediately." "No, Henry." Preston held up a hand. "She says she knows the law. I want to hear this. It'll be the comedy highlight of my week." He leaned in close to Nora, his breath smelling of scotch. "Go on. Explain how I'm going to steal this land. Make me laugh." Nora didn't move. She didn't retreat. She looked at the contract again. "You're talking about the accretion principle under New York State navigation law," Nora said. The words came out crisp, devoid of the hesitation she usually used to appear submissive. "Specifically, you're referencing the precedent set in Town of Hempstead versus Little. You believe that if you artificially accelerate the recession of the waterline, the newly dry land becomes yours by right of accretion." The smile on Preston's face faltered, just a fraction. Arthur, the lawyer, blinked. He adjusted his glasses. "However," Nora continued, taking a step closer to the table, ignoring Henry's frantic signaling, "you're missing the critical amendment introduced in the 2021 Environmental Conservation Act regarding avulsion versus accretion. If the water recession is sudden or man-made, which your blueprints suggest, given the drainage systems you plan to install, it's classified as avulsion, not accretion. The property line doesn't move, you won't gain an inch of land. In fact, under Section 15 WOFA 505, you'll be fined 40% of the project's value for attempting it." The silence in the restaurant changed. It wasn't the silence of awkward tension anymore. It was the silence of shock. Preston stared at her. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked at the blueprint. He looked at Arthur. "Is she—" Preston's voice was lower now. "Is she right?" Arthur was shuffling papers frantically, sweat dripping onto the linen. I need to check the 2021 addendums. I didn't think they applied to commercial zones of this size, but they apply to all zones bordering navigable waters," Nora said. She picked up the empty champagne flute she had been holding. You're about to lose $200 million on a zoning gamble that a first-year law student would have spotted. She placed the glass on the tray. Will there be anything else, sir? Or should I fetch that club soda now? Preston Calloway did not like to lose. He especially did not like to lose to staff. For a moment, the restaurant was frozen in a tableau of disbelief. A senator at the next table had actually put down his fork to watch. Preston's face turned a deep, alarming shade of crimson. The humiliation was burning him alive. He couldn't let a waitress walk away with the upper hand. It would be in the gossip columns by morning. Billionaire bested by busboy. He could see the headlines. "Wait," Preston commanded. His voice wasn't loud this time, but it was dangerous. Nora stopped. She hadn't turned her back yet. She met his gaze. "You memorized that," Preston said, standing up fully now, buttoning his jacket. He walked around the table to stand directly in front of her. He towered over her, using his height as a weapon. "You overheard Arthur talking about it earlier, or maybe you read a headline. You're parroting words you don't understand to try and embarrass me." "I assure you, Mr. Calloway, I understand them perfectly," Nora replied. "Do you?" Preston sneered. He turned to the room, spreading his arms. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems l'opulence has a prodigy in its midst, a genius hidden in an apron." Scattered, nervous laughter rippled through the room. Preston turned back to her, his eyes gleaming with malice. "If you're so smart, let's make this interesting. You humiliated me. You tried to make me look like a fool in front of my peers. I don't let that slide." He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He uncapped a gold fountain pen. "I'm currently in a dispute regarding a hostile takeover of a tech firm in Silicon Valley. Nebula Dynamics. My lawyers tell me the founder has a poison pill defense in his bylaws that makes him untouchable." Preston scribbled a number on the check. He ripped it out and held it up. "This is a check for $50,000. That's probably 3 years of your salary." He slapped the check onto the table. "If you can tell me, right now, without looking at your phone, how to bypass a flip-in poison pill strategy without triggering the shareholder dilution threshold, the money is yours. You can take off that apron and walk out of here." Isabella laughed again. "Preston, stop. She doesn't even know what a poison pill is. She thinks it's medication." "But," Preston leaned in, his face inches from Nora's, "if you try and fail, if you stutter or guess or waste my time, you're fired. Right now, I'll have Henri throw you out the back door, and I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I know every restaurant owner in New York." Henri looked terrified. "Nora, don't. Just apologize and go to the kitchen. Please." Nora looked at the check. $50,000. It would pay off her mother's medical bills. It would pay the rent for a year. It would buy her freedom. But more than that, she looked at Preston's smug, hateful face. He represented everything that had taken her life away from her 5 years ago. The arrogance, the certainty that money was a substitute for intellect. "I don't want your money, Mr. Calloway," Nora said softly. "Scared?" he taunted. "No, I don't want your money because it's dirty, but I will take the bet." "Name your terms," Preston challenged. "If I answer your question correctly," Nora said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, "you will apologize. Not to me, but to Henry, and to every member of the staff you've treated like garbage tonight. You will say it loud enough for everyone to hear, and you will tip the kitchen staff $10,000. Preston laughed so hard he nearly choked. "Deal. A $10,000 tip and an apology versus your job. Go ahead. Solve the poison pill." Nora didn't hesitate. She didn't need to think. This was the world she used to breathe before the fall. The flip-in provision, allows existing shareholders to purchase more shares at a discount if one shareholder acquires a certain percentage, usually 15 to 20%, Nora began. She walked around the table, pacing like a professor in a lecture hall. The goal is to dilute your shares so a takeover becomes mathematically impossible. However, the standard corporate bylaws for companies incorporated in Delaware, which Nebula Dynamics is, have a specific vulnerability known as the dead hand provision. If the current board is ousted, the new board can redeem the pill. She stopped in front of Preston. But the courts in Delaware have frowned upon dead hand provisions. So you don't attack the pill directly. You attack the board's fiduciary duty. You launch a proxy fight, not for the shares, but for the seats. You propose a slate of directors who run on a platform of selling the company to you at a premium. Once your directors are voted in by the frustrated shareholders who want the payout, they simply vote to redeem the poison pill themselves. You bypass the dilution entirely by becoming the board before you become the owner. The room was dead silent. Nora wasn't done. Or, she added, her eyes flashing, if you want to be aggressive, you use a tender offer conditioned on the redemption of the pill. You offer the shareholders a price they can't refuse, forcing them to sue their own board for breach of fiduciary duty if the board refuses to redeem the pill to allow the sale. You turn the shareholders against the founder. The poison pill becomes a suicide pill for the board. She clasped her hands in front of her apron. Is that sufficient, Mr. Calloway? Or would you like me to cite the case law? Revlon, Inca versus McAndrews and Forbes Holdings would be the relevant precedent regarding the board's duty to auction the company once a sale is inevitable. Preston Calloway looked like he had been struck by lightning. His mouth hung open, unhinged. The check for $50,000 lay on the table, fluttering slightly in the draft from the air conditioner. Arthur, the lawyer, had actually dropped his pen. He was staring at Nora with a mixture of horror and awe. She's right. The Revlon duty. That's exactly how we would do it. I know, Nora said. Who are you? Preston whispered. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a creeping fear. This wasn't a waitress. This was a predator in disguise. I'm the person waiting for your apology, Nora said. Preston looked around the room. He saw the smirks on the faces of his rivals. He saw the phones recording him. He was trapped. Preston gritted his teeth. He looked at Henry, who was trembling by the kitchen door. I apologize, Preston mumbled. Louder, Nora commanded. I apologize, Preston shouted, his face purple. To the staff, I was rude. There, are you happy? He threw a heavy stack of cash onto the table. The $10,000. We're leaving, Preston barked at his team. Now! He turned to storm out, desperate to escape the gaze of the woman who had just dismantled him. But as he passed Nora, he stopped. He couldn't help himself. You're wasted here, he hissed. You're a freak, a genius wiping tables. What a tragedy. The tragedy, Nora said calmly, is that you think this is all I am. Preston stormed out, his entourage scrambling after him. The restaurant erupted into applause. People were standing up. Henry was crying, but Nora didn't smile. She knew something they didn't. Preston Calloway was a vindictive man. He wouldn't let this go. She had humiliated him, but she had also revealed herself. And as she looked toward the entrance, she saw a man in a dark trench coat standing by the host stand. He hadn't clapped. He was watching her. And unlike Preston, he didn't look angry. He looked like he had finally found what he was hunting for. Nora's blood ran cold. The past had found her. The applause inside L'Opulence died down as quickly as it had begun, replaced by the frantic murmur of 100 high society gossips, desperately trying to uncover the identity of the waitress who had just neutered a titan of Wall Street. Nora didn't bask in the victory. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation with Preston evaporated, leaving her trembling. Her hands shook so badly she had to grip the edge of a busboy station to steady herself. Henry, the manager, was wiping tears of relief from his cheeks with a silk handkerchief. "Nora, ma chérie, that was terrifying. Brilliant, but terrifying. You have saved the night. The tip he left for the kitchen. It is a miracle." "I need a break, Henri," Nora said, her voice hollow. 5 minutes, please." "Take 10, take 20. You are the queen of l'opulence tonight." Nora slipped through the swinging silver doors into the chaotic heat of the kitchen. She dodged sous-chefs shouting orders and waiters balancing precarious towers of plates, heading straight for the back exit. She burst out into the cool night air of the alleyway. It smelled of wet pavement, garbage, and distant city exhaust, the smell of reality. She leaned back against the brick wall, closing her eyes, trying to slow her racing heart. She had made a mistake, a catastrophic mistake. For 5 years, she had been a ghost. Nora Vance, the quiet waitress who always took the extra shifts, who lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens, whose only companion was an elderly cat and a stack of library books, that Nora was safe, that Nora was invisible. Tonight, the old Nora, the one she had buried under layers of trauma and shame, had clawed her way to the surface, and she had done it in front of the most vindictive demographic on Earth, the Manhattan elite. A platinum lighter flicked in the shadows of the alley, startling her. A flame illuminated a lean face with sharp cheekbones and eyes that were too knowing. It was the man in the trench coat, the one who hadn't clapped. "That was quite a performance in there," the man said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and laced with a dangerous familiarity. He took a drag of a cigarette, the ember glowing red in the darkness. "Preston Calloway is going to need therapy, and a new legal team." Nora didn't move from the wall. She recognized him instantly. The years hadn't softened him. "Marcus," she said, her voice flat. Marcus Thorne stepped out of the shadows. In her previous life, Marcus had been her rival, her intellectual sparring partner, and occasionally the only person in the room who could keep up with her. Now he was the CEO of Thorne Capital, a private equity firm known for swallowing distressed companies whole. "It's not Nora Vance, is it?" Marcus said softly, walking toward her until he was just outside her personal space. "It's Eleanor Vance, the youngest partner in the history of Sterling and Cromwell, the prodigy of corporate litigation, the woman who drafted the Titan merger protocols before her 26th birthday." He paused, letting the smoke curl around them. "And the woman who vanished off the face of the earth 5 years ago, taking the blame for the Apex scandal." The words hit Nora like physical blows. The Apex scandal, the event that had obliterated her life. "I don't know who you're talking about," Nora said, fighting to keep the tremor out of her voice. "I'm just a waitress. Please leave me alone." Marcus laughed, a low, genuine sound that was terrifyingly out of place in the dirty alley. "Stop it, Eleanor. You just recited the Revlon precedents to Preston Calloway from memory. You didn't learn that waiting tables. You're the best legal mind of our generation, hiding in a tuxedo apron." He dropped his cigarette and crushed it beneath the heel of a polished Oxford shoe. "I've been looking for you for 3 years. Do you know how hard it is to find someone who doesn't want to be found in the digital age? You don't have a smartphone, no social media. You pay cash for everything. You live off the grid in the middle of the biggest grid in the world. It was impressive." "Why were you looking?" Nora asked. The fight was leaking out of her. He knew. The facade was gone. Because I didn't believe the official story, Marcus said. His gaze hardened. I never believed that Eleanor Vance, the woman who revered the law more than anything else, masterminded an embezzlement scheme to defraud her own clients. It didn't track. You were framed, Eleanor, and the people who did it are still sitting in corner offices. Nora pushed herself off the wall. It doesn't matter what you believe. It's over. I signed the admission of guilt. I took the disbarment. I took the exile. It's done. You took the fall to protect someone, Marcus corrected. Who was it? Your mentor? Judge Hemlock? Nora flinched at the name. Don't say his name. He's a senator now, you know, on the Judiciary Committee, while you're scrubbing champagne stains off trust fund babies. What do you want, Marcus? Nora hissed, desperation creeping in. Did you come here just to torment me? To gloat? I came here because I need you, Marcus said, his intensity shifting. The cool exterior cracked, revealing urgent necessity. I'm in the middle of the biggest deal of my life. It makes the Callaway merger look like a lemonade stand acquisition. If it goes through, it changes the landscape of global energy. If it fails, Thorn Capital ceases to exist. I'm disbarred, Marcus. I can't practice law. I can't help you. I don't need you to sign documents in court. I need your brain. I need the way you see patterns that nobody else sees. My current team of expensive lawyers are charging me $1,000 an hour to tell me what I already know. I need you to tell me what I don't know. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. Preston Callaway is a petty man, Eleanor. You embarrassed him tonight. By tomorrow morning, he will have made a few phone calls. Henri will fire you before noon. No reputable restaurant in the city will hire you. He's going to squeeze you until you break, just for the sport of it. He pressed the envelope into her reluctant hand. That's $10,000 cash, enough to float you for a month or two while you run. Or, he paused, holding her gaze. You come work for me as an external consultant. Off the books. I'll pay you double what you made as a partner at Sterling, and I will give you the resources to clear your name. Nora stared at the envelope. It felt heavy. I don't want to clear my name, she whispered. I just want peace. You will never have peace as long as you are hiding, Marcus said. The wolves found you tonight, Eleanor. You can either keep running, or you can remember that you used to be the alpha. Before she could respond, the kitchen door swung open. A frantic busboy stuck his head out. Nora, Henri needs you. Table 4 is asking for the champagne sommelier. Marcus stepped back into the shadows, a ghost once more. Think about it. His voice drifted from the darkness. A black car will be waiting at the corner of 34th and 8th tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Don't be late, counselor. Nora was left alone in the alley, clutching the envelope of cash, the scent of his expensive cologne lingering in the air like a promise or a threat. Nora didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her sagging mattress in Queens, watching the sun rise over the sprawling complex of industrial rooftops outside her window. The envelope of money sat on her small, scarred kitchen table next to a past-due electricity bill. Marcus was right about one thing. At 8:30 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was Henri. His voice was thick with regret. Nora, I am so sorry. Mr. Callaway. He made calls to the ownership group this morning. He threatened to pull his investment in their other properties if you remained employed. I have no choice. You are the best I ever had. But you are gone. She wasn't surprised. The numbness that had defined her last 5 years settled back over her. She packed her few belongings, her uniform, her comfortable shoes, into a tote bag. But before she could decide what to do with Marcus's offer, she had one obligation that superseded all others. By 10 a.m., Nora was walking through the sterile beige hallways of the Queen's Center for Long-Term Care. It was a depressing place, smelling of industrial cleaner and boiled vegetables, where underpaid staff did their best for patients discarded by the system. Her mother, Beatrice, was sitting by a window that overlooked a brick wall. She was frail, her once vibrant red hair now wispy white. The early onset dementia was stealing her away by inches. "Hi, Mum," Nora said softly, pulling up a metal chair. Beatrice looked at her with pleasant, vacant eyes. "Oh, hello, dear. Are you the new nurse? You look tired." It always crushed Nora a little bit more. "No, Mum, it's Nora, your daughter." "Nora." Beatrice tested the name on her tongue, a flicker of recognition, distant and fleeting. "My Nora is a big lawyer, you know. She lives in Manhattan in a building that touches the clouds. She's very important." Nora took her mother's thin, papery hand. "Yes, Mum, she is." "She sends me money," Beatrice whispered, conspiratorially. "For the good medicine. The doctors say it helps." The good medicine was an experimental cognitive treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. It cost $4,000 a month. It was the sole reason Nora worked 80-hour weeks on her feet. It was the reason she existed. A nurse put her head into the room. "Miss Vance?" "A word?" Nora stepped into the hallway. The nurse looked uncomfortable. "I hate to ask this, Nora, but your account is 2 months behind on the supplemental treatment payments. The administration is saying we have to stop the regimen starting Monday if we don't get caught up." Nora felt the walls closing in. The shame was a physical sickness. "I have the money. I'll pay it today. All of it." She thought of the $10,000 in Marcus's envelope. It would buy her 2 months, just 2 months of clarity for her mother. After paying the bill at the front desk, Nora walked out of the facility into the blinding midday sun. She felt hollowed out. Preston Calloway had taken her job. The medical system was taking her sanity. She looked at her watch. It was 11:15 a.m. She had missed Marcus's 9 a.m. deadline. She had chosen to run. But as she stood on the sidewalk, watching a city bus belch smoke as it pulled away, a sleek black Maybach pulled silently to the curb in front of her. The rear window rolled down with an electric hum. Marcus Thorne was inside, wearing a charcoal suit that looked immaculate. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading a briefing dossier on a tablet. "You're late, Eleanor," he said without looking up. "I told you," Nora said, clutching her tote bag tighter. "I'm not interested." And yet, here you are, standing on a corner 5 blocks from where I told you to meet me, looking like your world just ended. He finally looked at her. His eyes were devoid of pity, but full of understanding. "How is Beatrice?" Nora froze. "How do you know about my mother?" "I told you. I've been looking for you for 3 years. I know everything. I know about the care facility. I know about the experimental treatments. I know you just spent 80% of the cash I gave you last night to keep her on them for another 60 days. He closed the dossier and tapped the leather seat beside him. "Get in the car, Eleanor. Stop pretending you have a choice. Calloway already blacklisted you. By tomorrow, your landlord will suddenly decide he needs your apartment for a relative. The walls are closing in. You can let them crush you, or you can step into this car and fight back." Nora looked at the Maybach. It was a portal back to the world that had chewed her up and spat her out. It was a golden cage. But then she thought of Preston Calloway's sneering face. She thought of her mother's fading memories, held together only by expensive drugs. She opened the heavy door and slid into the cool, leather-scented interior of the car. "Smart girl," Marcus said to the driver. "Go." The car pulled away smoothly, gliding into the Manhattan traffic like a shark entering a school of fish. "Where are we going?" Nora asked, placing her worn tote bag on the floor, ashamed of how shabby it looked against the plush carpet. "To the battlefield," Marcus said. He pressed a button, and a partition rose between them and the driver. He handed her the tablet he had been reading. The screen displayed a company logo, a stylized blue globe with a lightning bolt through it. Ethelred Energy. "This is the target," Marcus said. "It's a European conglomerate focusing on next-gen nuclear tech. They want to break into the US market. They need a domestic partner to navigate the regulatory nightmare. They've narrowed it down to 2 firms, Thorn Capital and Callaway Industries." Nora looked up sharply. "Callaway? Preston has been trying to outbid me for 6 months. He's playing dirty, using his political connections, including your old friend Senator Hemlock, to block my regulatory approval. He wants this deal. It will make him the undisputed king of energy infrastructure in the Northeast." Marcus leaned in, his eyes cold. "I don't just want to win this deal, Eleanor. I want to bury him. I want to maneuver him into a position where his own aggression destroys him. I want to do to him what he tried to do to you last night. And you are the only person I know who understands his psychological weaknesses as well as his legal ones." The car turned onto Wall Street, the towering canyons of glass and steel rising around them. Nora felt a familiar, dangerous tingle in her fingertips. It was the feeling of power, the feeling of the game. "What's the obstacle?" Nora asked, her voice stronger now. She was already scanning the summary on the tablet. "The obstacle is a hidden liability in Ethelred's European portfolio that my due diligence team missed, but I know is there. If I sign the deal as is, I inherit a toxic asset that will bankrupt me. If I demand they reveal it, they'll walk away and sign with Callaway just to keep it hidden." Marcus looked at her, a challenge in his eyes. "So, counselor, how do I force them to disclose their own poison without scaring them into the arms of my enemy?" Nora stared at the tablet. The numbers and legal jargon began to rearrange themselves in her mind. The world of waitressing, of sore feet and fake smiles, receded. The grand chessboard opened up before her. She looked out the window as the Maybach pulled into the underground garage of a 70-story skyscraper. The sign above the entrance read, "Thorn Tower." "You don't force them to disclose it," Nora said quietly, her mind already 3 moves ahead. "You make them terrified of what happens if Callaway finds it first." Marcus smiled. A real smile this time. "Welcome back to the jungle, Eleanor." The transformation of Nora Vance did not happen in a salon, nor did it happen in a boutique. It happened in the war room on the 70th floor of Thorn Tower. The room was a fortress of solitude. Glass walls overlooking the Hudson River, a mahogany table long enough to land a helicopter on, and screens displaying real-time market fluctuations from Tokyo, London, and Zurich. Thorn stood by the window, watching the city below. He had introduced himself fully now, Dominic Thorn. He had used his middle name, Marcus, in the past, to keep a low profile. But those days were over. He was stepping into the light, and he was dragging Nora with him. "Callaway has a leak in my office," Thorn said, not turning around. "I've suspected it for months. Every time I move on a company, he bids within the hour. He has someone on my payroll feeding him intel." Nora was sitting at the table, surrounded by stacks of files labeled Ethelred Energy. She had showered in the executive suite's bathroom and changed into a spare, crisp white shirt Thorn had provided, rolling the sleeves up to her elbows. The waitress uniform lay in a trash bin in the corner, a symbol of a life shed. "You want to use the leak?" Nora said. It wasn't a question. She was already scanning the financial audits of Ethelred's subsidiary in the North Sea. "Exactly." Thorne turned, his eyes sharp. "I can't fire the mole yet. If I do, Calloway knows I'm onto him. I need to feed the mole disinformation. I need Calloway to believe that I have found a golden goose within Ethelred that makes the company worth double its asking price. I need him to get greedy." Nora pulled a red file from the bottom of the stack. Her eyes narrowed. "I found your toxic asset," she said. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Already? My analysts have been looking for 3 weeks." "Your analysts look for numbers. I look for silence. There's a gap in the shipping manifests for their Estonian branch, Baltic Future. They claim to be shipping spent fuel rods to a recycling facility in Finland, but the recycling facility has no record of receiving the volume listed. The mass doesn't add up." She tapped the paper. "They aren't recycling it, Dominic. They're dumping it. They're burying Class A nuclear waste in unmapped trenches in international waters. It's a violation of the OSPAR Convention. The moment this comes out, the fines won't just be in the millions. They'll be in the billions. And the liability will pierce the corporate veil. Whoever owns Ethelred when this news breaks effectively owns an ecological disaster." Thorne walked over and looked at the data. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "So, if I buy Ethelred, I buy a death sentence." "Yes," Nora said. "But Preston Calloway doesn't know that. He just sees a European energy giant with a monopoly on nuclear tech. So how do we make him steal it?" Nora stood up. She walked to the whiteboard and uncapped a marker. For the first time in 5 years, she felt the electric hum of her own intellect firing on all cylinders. She wasn't carrying a tray. She was carrying the fate of an empire. "We create a fake due diligence report," Nora said, sketching a timeline. "We draft a document that claims Baltic Future has discovered a new, proprietary method of fuel recycling that cuts costs by 80%. We label it eyes only and top secret. We leave it on a server that you know your mole can access." "We bait the hook," Thorne agreed. "But that's not enough," Nora cut in. "Calloway is arrogant, but he's not stupid. He won't trust a document alone. He needs to see panic. He needs to see you fighting for it." She turned to him, her expression hardening. "You have to schedule the signing meeting for Friday night at the Meteor Gala. You have to invite the Ethelred CEO, and you have to look desperate. You have to make Calloway believe that you are trying to close this deal before the market opens on Monday, because you want to hoard the profits." "The Meteor Gala," Thorne mused. "That's Calloway's home turf. He's on the board of the museum. Senator Hemlock will be there." Nora froze at the name. Hemlock, the man who had been her mentor, the man who had whispered in her ear that she had to take the fall for the Apex scandal to save the firm. The man who had promised to protect her, then let her rot in obscurity while he climbed the political ladder to Washington. "Are you ready to see him?" Thorne asked quietly. "Hemlock?" Nora looked at her reflection in the darkened glass of the window. She didn't see the tired waitress with the sore feet anymore. She saw a woman who had survived the fire and was now holding the match. "I'm not just ready to see him," Nora said, her voice ice cold. "I'm ready to destroy everything he built." Thorne pressed a button on his intercom. "Get the stylist team up here, and call the tailor. We have work to do." He looked at Nora. "If we're going to war, Eleanor, you need armor." The next 48 hours were a blur of strategy and silk. Nora Vance ceased to exist. In her place, Eleanor Vance was resurrected. But this wasn't the eager, naive lawyer of 5 years ago. This was a refined, sharper version, Thorne spared no expense. A team of stylists cut and dyed her hair from a mousy, frizzy brown to a sleek, sharp bob of midnight black. The dress they chose was not designed to be pretty, it was designed to be intimidating. It was a floor-length gown of emerald green velvet, high-necked and long-sleeved, with a back that plunged dangerously low. It looked like money. It looked like power. But the most important accessory wasn't the diamond earrings Thorne lent her. It was the earpiece. "We're live," Thorne's head of security said on Friday evening. They were in the limousine, heading toward the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "The mole took the bait," Thorne said, checking his phone. "My servers show an unauthorized download of the fake Baltic Future report at 4 a.m. this morning. The IP address traces back to a shell company owned by Callaway Industries." "He has the fake report," Nora said, smoothing the velvet on her lap. "He thinks he's stealing a diamond mine. He doesn't know he's stealing a grenade." "He'll move tonight," Thorne predicted. "He'll try to interrupt our signing ceremony. He'll bring lawyers. He'll bring Hemlock to pressure the Ethelred CEO." The car slowed. The red carpet of the Meteor Gala awaited. Flashes of paparazzi cameras exploded like lightning storms. "One last thing," Thorne said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded document. "This is an employment contract. Chief Legal Officer of Thorne Capital. Starting salary of $2 million, plus equity." Nora looked at him. "I haven't won yet." "You already won when you found the Estonian leak," Thorne said. "Tonight is just the victory lap. Sign it later. Right now, we have a show to put on." The door opened. The noise of the crowd rushed in. Thorne stepped out and offered his hand. Nora took it. As she stepped onto the red carpet, the cameras went wild. They didn't recognize her. To them, she was a mystery woman on the arm of New York's most elusive billionaire. But inside, waiting by the Temple of Dender, Preston Calloway was smiling. He had the stolen report in his pocket. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. He was about to learn the hard way. Never bet against a woman who has nothing left to lose. The Temple of Dendur, inside the Metropolitan Museum, was glowing in amber light, but the real heat was coming from the table near the reflective pool. Nora Vance walked beside Dominic Thorne, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was no longer the invisible waitress in a stiff uniform. Tonight, she was armored in a floor-length emerald velvet gown, her hair cut into a sharp, intimidating bob. She looked like a weapon sheathed in silk. "There he is," Dominic murmured. Preston Calloway was holding court near the bar, looking triumphant. Beside him stood Senator William Hemlock, the man who had betrayed Nora 5 years ago. Seeing him was a physical blow, but Nora kept her face a mask of bored detachment. They approached Lars Jensen, the CEO of Ethelred Energy, who sat nervously with a leather folio. "Mr. Thorne," Jensen said, standing up, "I am ready to sign. We close tonight?" "Standard terms," Dominic said, uncapping his pen. Just as the pen touched the paper, a voice boomed across the hall. "Stop!" Preston Calloway marched toward them, his entourage in tow. Heads turned. The music seemed to dip. "Lars, don't sign that!" Preston shouted, slamming his hand onto the table. "Thorne is trying to rob you. He knows about the recycling breakthrough in Estonia. He knows Baltic Future is a gold mine, and he's trying to steal it." Dominic stood up, feigning outrage. "Preston, get away from my table. This is a private negotiation." "I'm making it public," Preston sneered. He turned to Jensen. "I am prepared to offer you 30% above Thorne's asking price. Cash, tonight. Senator Hemlock is here to fast-track the regulatory approval." Hemlock stepped forward, radiating authority. "It's true, Mr. Jensen. If you sign with Thorne, regulatory hurdles might appear." It was a naked threat. Jensen looked between the two men, Thorne's manufactured panic and Preston's greedy confidence. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne," Jensen stammered, pushing Dominic's folio away. "Business is business." Preston slapped his own contract onto the table. Jensen signed furiously. Preston signed next to him, holding the document up like a trophy. "Done," Preston gloated. "Ethelred Energy belongs to Callaway Industries." He turned to Dominic, laughing cruelly. "You lose, Dominic. And is this your consolation prize? The waitress from the restaurant?" He pointed a mocking finger at Nora. "Did you bring her here to fetch us celebratory drinks?" The crowd tittered. Nora stepped forward, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply on the stone. She didn't look at Preston. She looked at the senator. "Hello, William," she said. Senator Hemlock froze. The color drained from his face. "Eleanor," he whispered. "Eleanor Vance?" The name rippled through the crowd. "The disgraced lawyer?" "You know her?" Preston asked, confused. "She used to work for me," Hemlock stammered. Nora turned to Preston. The silence in the room was absolute. "Mr. Callaway," she said, her voice projecting clearly. "Congratulations. You just acquired Ethelred Energy, which means you also acquired its subsidiary, Baltic Future." "That's right," Preston sneered. "The recycling breakthrough." "There is no breakthrough," Nora said calmly. "The document you stole from Mr. Thorne's server was a fabrication, a trap." She pulled a blue file from her clutch. "This is the real audit. Baltic Future isn't recycling fuel rods. They are illegally dumping Class A radioactive waste into the North Sea. You just bought a toxic waste dump, Preston. The fines are estimated at $2 billion. The cleanup will cost another $3 billion. And since you waived due diligence to rush the signing, you are personally liable." Preston dropped the contract. "No, that's a lie. William, fix this." Nora shifted her gaze to the senator. "He can't fix it," she said coldly. "Because the Justice Department just received a package containing the unredacted emails from the Apex scandal, the ones that prove I was innocent, and that you, Senator, were laundering money for the cartels." Hemlock stumbled back as sirens began to wail outside, the sound growing louder, cutting through the Central Park night. "You're dead," Hemlock hissed. "You're a nobody, a waitress." "I am Eleanor Vance," she said, her voice ringing off the temple walls. "I am the chief legal officer of Thorne Capital, and you are under arrest." Dominic stepped up beside her as the police burst through the doors. He looked at the two ruined men. "Checkmate." Nora didn't wait to watch them be handcuffed. She turned on her heel, her emerald dress swirling around her. She had come to silence the room, and she had left them speechless. The chaos of the Metropolitan Museum steps faded into the background as Nora locked eyes with the frail figure standing in the vestibule. It was her mother, Beatrice. But the vacant, confused stare of dementia was gone, replaced by a sharp, tearful clarity. "I saw you, Ellie," Beatrice whispered, embracing her daughter. "You looked like a queen." Nora looked at Dominic in shock. "I had her transferred to the Sterling Institute yesterday," Dominic said softly. "They administered the new enzyme treatment immediately. I knew if you were going to burn down your old life tonight, you would need someone waiting for you in the new one. You're not alone anymore, Eleanor." Before Nora could thank him, the heavy thud of boots on concrete shattered the moment. The FBI had arrived. It wasn't a negotiation. Preston Callaway was dragged down the museum steps in handcuffs, his face a mask of sweaty panic. "Do you know who I am?" he screamed, struggling against the agents. "That woman is a waitress. She's lying. You can't do this to me." Nora stepped to the edge of the stairs, looking down at him with cold pity. "I didn't ruin you, Preston," she said, her voice carrying over the paparazzi's flashbulbs. "Greed ruined you. I just turned on the lights." Beside him, Senator Hemlock was led away in silence, weeping. The evidence Nora had released, linking him to the Apex money laundering scheme, was irrefutable. His career was over. Nora turned to the wall of news cameras. 5 years ago, I was silenced by men who thought their power made them untouchable, she declared. To anyone else out there hiding corruption behind a checkbook, we are watching, and we are coming for you. The next morning, the headlines were seismic. Billionaire busted and the redemption of Eleanor Vance. In the penthouse of Thorn Tower, Dominic slid a contract across the desk to Nora. Callaway Industries is bankrupt, he said. We're acquiring their assets for pennies on the dollar and setting up a trust to clean up the toxic waste. But I still need you to sign this. Nora looked at the document. Chief Legal Officer. I don't want you to work for me, Eleanor, Dominic said, meeting her gaze. I spent 5 years looking for an equal. I want a partner. Nora smiled, picking up the pen. Partner, she agreed, but I want 5% more equity. Dominic laughed. Done. 3 months later, a hush fell over L'Opulence as Nora and Dominic walked in. Henri, the manager, rushed forward, looking terrified but delighted. Miss Vance, table 1 is available for you, always. Nora paused. She spotted a new bus girl near the kitchen, trembling as she balanced a heavy tray of silverware. The patrons were watching. Nora walked over, gently adjusting the girl's grip. Don't let them rush you, Nora whispered, pressing a heavy tip into the girl's hand. You control the table. The table doesn't control you. She returned to Dominic. Actually, Henri, she said, we'll take the booth in the back. It has a better view of the real work. As they walked through the dining room, the wealthy elite didn't just stare. One by one, they stood up. It was a silent ovation for the woman who had walked through fire and returned to own the room. Nora Vance sat down, unfolded her napkin, and smiled. She was finally exactly where she belonged, and that is how Nora Vance went from clearing tables to clearing her name. She proved that dignity isn't determined by a job title and that intelligence is the one weapon money can't buy. Preston Callaway learned the hard way that when you underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who endure, you are digging your own grave. Nora didn't just win a bet, she won her life back. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Did you guess the twist about the senator? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about underdogs taking down billionaires, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.